Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing about borrowing. So, how does borrowing work? Well, let's start with an example. Say your friend Bob here offers you $100 for taking him to the beach today. In exchange, though, you have to pay him back $20 per month for the next 6 months. Would you say yes? Maybe you really want to buy the latest gaming console, or you're going to use the $100 to buy a necklace online that you resell for more money. In that case, you might say yes. When you borrow from the bank or use credit cards, you're agreeing to a similar deal. Now, borrowing is closely related to the idea of credit, which is often used when discussing credit cards, auto loans, home mortgages, and more. Credit is essentially the idea of buy now, pay later. Someone loans you an amount of money right now, and then you use it to buy an item and later pay it back. Borrowing also is closely related to the idea of interest. In the case of Bob, for example, you ended up having to pay $20 to borrow money from him. That $20 is the interest, right? You gave him $100, but then you had to eventually pay him back $120. That $20 again, that's the interest, or the cost of borrowing. Now, borrowing and the idea of buy now, pay later can be very alluring, but many people borrow without considering that they have to pay for it at a later date. So while borrowing can serve you well if used correctly, it can also hurt you significantly if not. Let's talk about some of the main borrowing uses. First, we have convenience. Especially in the digital age, holding a credit card comes in handy when you're shopping on e-commerce websites like Amazon. Another reason is for instant gratification. This is like in the case with your friend Bob. You wanted to buy the latest gaming console or necklace right away. So instead of waiting to save up for it, you bought it now and thought, I'll just pay later. You also have this idea of protection, because when you purchase things on a credit card, it's easier to get a refund than if you had just used paper money. That's because there's records. Another potential reason for borrowing is emergency security. Borrowing can be your personal lifeguard in an emergency. For example, let's say you break your arm while ice skating. You can't afford to wait, and you might have to borrow immediately. Another use of borrowing is investments. Let's say you want to invest in a startup or real estate. You might be able to loan a bit of money now, invest it, and make more money later on. In other words, you're taking a loan now to invest that may grow in value later. Finally, we have special offers. You might have heard, for example, of credit cards that come with travel awards. Some people get this credit for these perks and discounts or other rewards that credit issuers offer. And lastly, we have credit history. Building a good credit history can be extremely important, and this is in fact one of the primary reasons why it's good to get a credit card now when you're young, as long as you use it wisely. That brings me to the last topic, the risks of borrowing. Like mentioned earlier, borrowing and the idea of buy now, pay later can be a very tempting practice, especially with the idea of instant gratification. However, if you're not careful, you may find yourself in financial mayhem and looming debt if you realize that you're unable to return the money back to the lender before a designated payment period. In order to avoid this, you should think carefully when you borrow and ask yourself these few critical questions. How many extra hours do I need to put into my job to pay back a loan? How much of my savings can be used to pay off a loan? If interest rates on the loan grow, am I financially stable enough to make financial adjustments accordingly? If one or more answers to these questions is a no, you really may want to reconsider borrowing, and anticipate a time in the future when you can. Or perhaps you can focus more on saving up and then paying for that item. Thank you, and I hope this gave you a better idea of borrowing, its uses, and finally its risks. See you next time.